There is no doubt in my mind that the UFC and Dana White are protecting Alex Pereira from Magomed Ankalaev, and we're going to lay it all out in this video, including Pereira discussing how he ended up fighting Khalil Rountree instead of Magomed Ankalaev in an interview that he did recently with Kevin Iole. And I'm so thankful because I was going to record this video earlier, but I waited a little bit. Kevin Iole dropped his interview with Dana White. And in this interview, Kevin Iole presses Dana White as to why Khalil Rountree got the title shot over Magomed Ankalaev. And we're going to break down all the misinformation surrounding Magomed Ankalaev demanded Abu Dhabi, Magomed Ankalaev ducked Pereira. We're going to break it all down in this video with receipts. We have a lot to look at. We're going to look at a Dana White interview with Kevin Iole, which I already mentioned. Great interview. We'll link it down in the description. We're also going to look at a Kevin Iole, Alex Pereira interview as well. This was just done the other day. I will link this down in the description. And also, one of the last things we're going to look at, or actually we're going to look at this first, is a Magomed Ankalaev interview from July of this year. But I want to start off with some of the narratives that we have. And one of them that I keep seeing spewed by kind of, just I would say the general Dagestani hater MMA fan base, and it drives me nuts every time I see it, is Magomed Ankalaev demanded Abu Dhabi. He demanded Abu Dhabi. Let me tell you where this stems from, because on this channel, we actually cover facts. We don't just make up stuff. We don't just go with, popular opinions, appeal to popular opinion fallacy. We actually try to figure out and get to the bottom of what's going on. So let's go to the origin story of Magomed Ankalaev demanding Abu Dhabi. Here we go. Here we are. He tweeted on April 14th, Alex Pereira, UFC, tagged him, versus me, Abu Dhabi. You can't make this up. This is him demanding Abu Dhabi. And then, and just in case that isn't demanding enough, how could Magomed Ankalaev demand Abu Dhabi? People act like if you're a Muslim fighter, you basically live in Abu Dhabi. You can just ride your camel right to the arena if you're Muslim. Somehow Abu Dhabi, just because it's better for their time zone, they act like every Muslim fighter literally lives in Abu Dhabi. It's not a problem when a fighter, from the UK wants to fight in the UK. It's not a problem when a fighter from America wants to fight in America. But him just merely saying me versus you in Abu Dhabi is somehow demanding it. And if that isn't demanding enough of Magomed Ankalaev, let's check out this. Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, New York, Vegas, doesn't matter. Anywhere, anytime, buy KO, be ready, Alex. June 30th. That's crazy demands. Can you believe he had the audacity to try to dictate where Pereira was going to defend his title? No, he didn't. And if this isn't clear enough, we're going to look at a clip of him in an interview saying this exact same thing. Okay, he says this exact same thing. I'll fight anywhere. I don't have visa issues. I just want to fight for the title next. That's all Magomed Ankalaev wanted to do. But instead, now we're getting Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree at UFC 307. And we're getting Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakij at UFC 308 in Abu Dhabi. So now people are saying, see, he only wanted to fight in Abu Dhabi. Well, we're going to get an answer directly from Pereira. We're also going to get an answer from Magomed Ankalaev. And we're also going to get an answer from Dana White himself. Thank God. But one thing I want to cover before we get to that is the next narrative that Magomed Ankalaev ducked Pereira. He ducked him at UFC 300 is the narrative that I truly see the most. There's some people saying that he ducked him at UFC 303, but that really isn't as prevalent, and that's not true either. Neither one of them is true. And I see people sharing this clip, okay? We're not going to actually listen to it because it's in a different language anyway with subtitles. But essentially, people are saying in this clip, and I'll link this clip actually down in the description. If somebody, if they speak Russian or whatever language Magomed Ankalaev speaks, translate it for me. I'm very curious. Because people say, the quote is, I actually was offered the fight with Alex Pereira at UFC 300. Since we were in the holy month of Ramadan, I had to turn down this fight. First off, I'm not sure that's the exact translation, okay? But let's just say it is. UFC 300 was thrown together on short notice. So even if somehow he was offered the UFC 300 spot, which he's clarified that he was never officially offered it. Him, his manager, also said that. Pereira has never said that he was officially offered 300. And even if it was true, you expect him to take it on short notice when he's observing Ramadan. That makes a whole lot of sense. So if he doesn't take that on short notice like Jamal Hill did with a torn Achilles, a hurt Achilles, then somehow that's ducking Pereira and that forfeits him his title shot, even though he's on a 12-fight unbeaten streak. So again, I don't even believe this is the case. We're going to look at a clip from an interview where he kind of clarifies and talks about it, that it was never anything concrete, but he really would have preferred not to fight during Ramadan. But this is the gotcha clip. Yeah, he turned him down. Yeah, UFC 300 swapped main events 8 times. And also, if Ankalaev turned down Pereira, you don't think Dana White would have used that as an excuse? You don't think he would have used that as an excuse for why Ankalaev got skipped over? Oh, well, we offered it to him. He turned it down. Dana White's not trashed Ankalaev at all, other than, calling him boring post UFC 282, which again is another made up narrative. But yeah, I'm not buying this. We're going to look at a clip from Magomed Ankalaev in a second, but we also have this. This was Ankalaev when Pereira versus Rountree was announced. I received lots of messages today regarding the light heavyweight title fight. My job is to smash people's face, whoever they put in front of me. I will destroy Rockets in Abu Dhabi, and I will not be denied. I don't need nobody to feel bad for me, and then tag Dana White and Mick Maynard. So, that's a great attitude to have. Look, I'm just going to smash who's ever in front of me. And in my opinion, I get a lot of heat for this. Ankalaev is the uncrowned champion anyway. He beat Jan Blachowicz for the vacant belt, and unfortunately, the judges gave it a draw, even though it shouldn't have been. And that fight was just shit on, even though it wasn't. Now, one last thing I want to take a look at. And again, you can say, okay, well, maybe they're lying, but we don't have anything contrary. What I'm trying to say here is, because we're going to look at Ali Abdelaziz, who's Magomed's manager, saying they were never offered the fight. And people are going to say, well, you believe them? Well, you're using this interview with just subtitles, not even a real translator here, to say that he was 100% concrete offered the fight. So if you're using his word to say that he was offered it, we've already, seen now his manager saying he was not offered it. Just to be clear, UFC never offered a fight to Magomed Ankalaev against Alex Pereira. This is one thing I'm 100% certain about. We're going to hear Ankalaev say the same thing here in a minute in an interview. And then the last thing I want to show you, in the last narrative I want to debunk while we're looking at just like tweets and stuff, people are calling Magomed Ankalaev boring. He's a boring Dagestani. He doesn't deserve it. This is Ankalaev's response. Alex has 6 KOs in the UFC. I have 6 KOs. He knows why he's not fighting me and fighting the number 8 guy. Let's be real. Focus on your fight. I will do the same. We'll see after if you will accept. Good luck, champ. Now, I think that's a fine message. People calling Ankalaev boring are straight up delusional. Let's go to Pereira's resume, okay? Pereira's resume, he's one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC, there's no doubt, okay? He has 11 total pro fights, okay? 11-2 in his pro fights. He has 9 KOs, TKOs, okay? So his percentage to fights, his percentage of KOs compared to the number of fights he has is higher than Ankalaev's, but Ankalaev's not far behind. Has 19 fights, okay? 11 finishes, 10 via KO, 1 via submission. So to sit there and act like Ankalaev is some type of boring fighter is just insane. And then you also have people saying he's a grappler, which even Pereira, and I don't think we're really going to look at that clip too much. Even Pereira said in the Kevin Iole interview, yeah, he's not much of a ground guy. He's going to strike as well. He's a striker. So the narrative that Ankalaev turned him down, the narrative that Ankalaev demanded Abu Dhabi, incorrect. The narrative that Ankalaev is boring, just factually incorrect. No matter which way you look at it, objectively, it's just simply not true. But now let's jump ahead to the actual clips that we're going to take a look at, because there's a lot we need to look at. First, he's talked about, was he offered Pereira? And he says, look, there was a little bit of talks about it and Ramadan was going on, but it was never anything official offered. It was never offered to me, which I, beyond a shadow of a doubt, do believe there is no way the UFC would offer Ankalaev a title shot over Jamal Hill, who was already in line to come back because he never lost his belt. He vacated his belt. So Jamal Hill Pereira was already next regardless. So why would they offer Ankalaev when Hill was already next in line, coming off that win over his brother at Thanksgiving dinner? But here's him talking about it a little bit here, and this is in July.
I know there were some talks, but because of the Ramadan month, I think maybe that was one of the reasons I couldn't participate. But there was nothing solid, really.
So there was nothing solid, really. So, again, even if it is somehow he was officially offered a fight during UFC 300 on short notice, he's supposed to accept a fight on short notice during Ramadan. just because, look how that worked out for Yuri Prochazka. His career's over. He's never going to be champion ever again. And I love Yuri Prochazka. So you have that. Then you have another narrative that we haven't got to yet, but I just only going to cover it in this clip here of, Magomed Ankalaev doesn't fight. He isn't active. Pereira's super active. By the way, Magomed Ankalaev, let's see, when did he last fight? He fought in January 2024, but he's been waiting for a title shot. He was promised a title shot. Pereira this, Pereira that, ended up short notice at 300, ended up short notice at 303. But Walker fought in January, fought in October. He fought the December the previous year. It's not like he's super inactive. And he has a fight against Alexander Rakic coming up in October. So in a 12-month calendar, a calendar year, you have, I don't even know if I'm using that saying correctly, you have 3 fights from Ankalaev. October to October. 3 fights. Just over a year. 3 fights. So to act like he's super inactive, factually untrue. But he's asked, why haven't you fought? This was the question. And by the way, we're just playing the answers from the translator. Why are we going to listen to him? We're just going to listen to the translator here. So if that makes sense. And I will link all these interviews down in the description. We're going to get to the Pereira interview with Kevin Iole in a second, as well as the Dana White interview.
Yes. Normally during the month of Ramadan, I don't train hard. I don't train much. So that's one of the reasons for downtime. But also we were waiting for the outcome of Prochazka and Pereira rematch to see what the outcome might be and if I will get title shot myself. But we are patient. We're waiting, and definitely.
So he was just waiting because he was told he was going to get the next title shot. 12-fight unbeaten streak, beat most of the guys in the division, expected to get the next title shot over a guy in Khalil Rountree who's basically beaten nobody, coming off a win over Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith gets you a title shot nowadays. I'm about to drop down to light heavyweight, okay, and get me a title shot. Win over Anthony Smith gets you a title shot nowadays. But also, the narrative and the hate in general on fighters for not fighting around Ramadan is craziness. Okay, so they have, 1 month a year? And then I guess the month after they don't want to fight. So what is it? Usually March and April. Oh, 2 months out of the year, they don't want to get a scheduled fight, and somehow that's criminal. Act like they're asking for, they only can fight during a 1 month window per year. That's the way you would think. Last clip we're going to look at from this interview, because there was a narrative, and I just want to dispel all of them in this video, because it's an absolute travesty that Khalil Rountree is getting a title shot, is some people were saying that Magomed Ankalaev did not have a visa to get into the country, even though he fought in Vegas in January of this year.
As of now, we don't have any certain date set. But to answer your question, I do not have any problems with visa right now. I have a valid visa, so if it's going to be here, that's one option.
So there you go. He does not have any issues with a valid visa. He can get to the United States, no problem. He fought in Las Vegas in January of 2024. He's fighting in Abu Dhabi because that's what the market demand is, okay? They're going to put guys like that in Abu Dhabi, okay? So there we have it from Ankalaev. Then we have Pereira, and this is where it's really pretty obvious that the UFC is protecting Pereira. And one thing that Pereira says in this interview makes me believe maybe he is ducking him. Because to say this is crazy. To say what he says in this interview is crazy, but we're going to get to that in a second. He's asked, were you surprised that you were not offered Ankalaev? And again, we're going to listen to the translator. I highly encourage you to go check out this entire interview. And what's great is Kevin Iole dropped this 2 days ago. And then today he dropped an interview with Dana White that we're going to take a look at in a second as well, where he asked Dana White directly and presses him on it. Like, what's going on? Why is Ankalaev not getting the title shot? But let's listen to his response.
Honestly, yes, I was surprised and understood why the organization did not win with Ankalaev, but they did. You know what I mean? I think the fans was a little off at first, but they see the build up to the fight. I think they accept more and more. They're more excited. And I think in general now I'm too, and I think it's going to be a great fight to the fans. Everybody going to like to watch.
Yeah, it's a horrible fight. It might be an exciting knockout, but it's a horrible fight. Nobody cares about it, to be quite honest. I don't think there's any buzz surrounding this fight. But he was surprised that the UFC did not offer him Ankalaev. So if Pereira's not being offered Ankalaev, you think Ankalaev is being offered Pereira? Like, people are acting like somehow he turned down a fight at 307. He has a fight booked 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. I mean, what's the exact day? I believe it's October 26th. Yeah, October 26th is when Ankalaev is fighting next. He's fighting Rakic. By the way, we're going to get to a narrative about that in a second. And Pereira's fighting on October 5th. I mean, that's just craziness. Just craziness that they're not fighting each other, and it makes no sense. But the next clip is the really damning clip. Because he talks about the UFC, and he basically admits, look, the UFC's protecting me. Maybe he doesn't realize what he's saying here. And then he says something that just starts to make me believe he would be ducking him. But I really don't believe Pereira's actually ducking him. But it's just crazy to even say something like this. And I think maybe it's a little bit of trolling, but you guys can be the judge. But listen to this.
Talk about light heavyweight, absolutely, no, the winner of the fight. And even his manager, right? Super renowned guy famous on the MMA world, go and say that, this guy's not going to fight. Go talk to Dana White, bro. Dana White's the one that make the matchup. It's not Alex, right? And then he goes and say that the fact that Ankalaev is not fighting for the title is a joke, like almost like clown stuff. So now he's saying that the UFC is a space squad, because if the UFC and Dana White and the guys that decide, so they are joke, they're clowns, they're...
Yes, they are. They are jokes and they are clowns. You know, they canceled the UFC 303 main event, Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, and left the fans up in the air for 2 weeks. They're giving undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot. There's more undeserved title shots than title shots nowadays. So yes, they are jokes and clowns. But again, Pereira's putting it on the UFC. Look, I would have fought Ankalaev. This was the UFC's decision because the UFC is protecting Alex Pereira. They want him to hold on to that light heavyweight title because he is one of their bigger stars in the organization and they don't want him to lose. That is why, and I'm not even saying he definitely lose to Ankalaev. It's the best fight you can make in the division, and unfortunately, they're fighting 2 weeks apart, 3 weeks apart. But he says, look, you know, his manager's calling them clown. This fight's a clown show or whatever it may be. It's a joke. Well, they're the ones making the decision, so are they a joke? That just tells me the decision was solely on the UFC. Now, maybe he's just putting it on the UFC. We're going to listen to it one more time. Maybe he's just putting it on the UFC, but I doubt Pereira's going to the UFC and saying, yeah, I don't want to fight Ankalaev. I just can't imagine Pereira saying that.
This guy's not going to fight. Go talk to Dana White, bro. Dana White's the one that make the matchup. It's not Alex, right? And then he goes and say that the fact that Ankalaev is not fighting for the title is a joke, like almost like clown stuff. So now he's saying that the UFC is a space squad because if the UFC and Dana White and the guys that decide, so they are joke, they're clowns, they're circus. So you got to solve that with the organization. You know what I mean? So,
by the way, here's where Pereira jumps in and says something crazy. Could not believe it. And I know fans are going to cheerlead it. But to make that title fight is so devoid of logic. Coming off a win over Anthony Smith, you're getting a title shot. Is insanity over a guy who's on a 12-fight winning streak. Also demolishing Anthony Smith in that winning streak as well, when Anthony Smith was even better at that point. But what's crazy about this to me is, and I'm just going to break this down for you right now, Magomed Ankalaev, 12-fight unbeaten streak, brutalized Johnny Walker, should have been the champion against Jan Blachowicz, brutalized Anthony Smith, brutalized Thiago Santos, brutalized Volkan Ozdemir. I mean, I don't want to say arguably undefeated, but should be undefeated. But Paul Craig caught him in the third round of a fight that he was dominating, subbed him. But there's guys on his resume that literally brutalized Khalil Rountree. And he's not getting a title fight. And let me tell you what's going to happen. When he beats Alexander Rakic, the fans are going to say, oh, he beat Alexander Rakic. Rakic is coming off a loss. All of a sudden, Rakic isn't going to be enough. Basically, Magomed Ankalaev is going to beat everyone in the top 10 except Pereira, and then they're still going to say it's not enough. It's just craziness. But here's where Pereira chimes in. And I heard this. I'm like, dude might be ducking. Maybe behind the scenes he's telling the UFC he doesn't want to fight Magomed Ankalaev.
Right. Eu não tenho culpa que o Ankalaev tem estilo ruim, né? Que as últimas lutas dele aí, que, pô, ninguém
I'm just going to let this play through because he doesn't talk for that long and then the translator just jumps in.
gostou, né? Então, evitando ele. Eu não tenho culpa disso, eu quero lutar com ele. E, pô, pra mim vai ser uma luta boa também. Muitas pessoas aí falam do meu chão, das minhas defesas de queda. Pô, é só colocar essa luta aí, eles vão ver o que vai acontecer.
Bro, honestly, it's not my fault that Ankalaev have such a boring style of fighting that nobody want to watch, that the guys don't want to put him in. You know what I mean? I'm ready to fight the guy. He's ready to fight me. So whenever they put that fight, people talk about my ground. So there's a good chance for me to go and show everybody.
And then he also goes on to say, look, Ankalaev doesn't use that much ground game anyway. He hasn't shown that much in the UFC either, which is true because Ankalaev's a striker and people are calling him boring even though he's KO'd so many guys. But to call Ankalaev boring, that tells me, I mean, that's either a severe troll move or Pereira actually doesn't want to fight him. Or that's just what the UFC said to him. It strikes me, and we're going to pick up on a little hint from Dana White as well. It strikes me as the UFC just said, look, Pereira, we want you to fight Khalil Rountree. It's going to be a more exciting fight. But in reality, the UFC is protecting Alex Pereira. They want him to hold on to that light heavyweight title. He's saved so many cards. He's becoming a big star in the UFC. And they want him to hold on to the belt. Dana White will drop to his knees and scream up to the sky, "Why?" Similar to what Michael Chandler did when he got the phone call that Conor McGregor was out with a broken pinky toe. If he has Leon Edwards getting dumped on his bald spot by Bilal Muhammad and losing the welterweight title in the UK, Sean O'Malley getting dumped on his bald spot and having his back blown out by Merab Dvalishvili at UFC Noche to win the bantamweight title, and then to cap off the year to have Ankalaev beat their star in Pereira, who's willing to step in and fight on any card, to have him potentially lose his belt to Ankalaev at the end of the year, Dana White couldn't handle all three of those defeats in 1 year. He just couldn't handle it. Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at, and the last thing we're going to take a look at, is the interview with Dana White. Because Kevin Iole specifically asked him, like, I don't understand. What's going on here? Why is Rountree fighting for the belt when he's ranked number 8 and, you know, the win streak isn't even remotely the same. The level of opposition isn't remotely the same. Meanwhile, you have Magomed Ankalaev, who's literally fighting 2 weeks later. Why didn't you make the fight? And we'll see what Dana says, because at first he ducks it, and then he's asked again. And let's see what he says then.
Let's go to the rankings. He was ranked number 8, and you made a fight a week or two before that for number 2, Magomed Ankalaev. Why?
By the way, shout out to Kevin Iole. I will link this full interview. It just dropped recently. I will link this full interview down in the description. I encourage you guys all to go check it out. Leave a comment. Support Kevin Iole. Subscribe to his channel. One thing I want to say, I'm not going to play the clip for you. Dana White in this interview, and I might make a separate video on this interview in its entirety because there's a lot of hidden gems from it. Dana White's ranting and raving about the rankings. Gaethje's ranked here, and Hamzat's ranked here, and Jones is ranked here, and this and that, and Holloway's ranked here. Well, you just give number 8 a title shot anyway, so what's it matter? Who gives a fuck what the rankings are? That's my thought process. You just do it. You're like, you know, you go to Popeyes, you go through the drive-thru at Popeyes. Hey, can I take your order? You're like, well, it doesn't matter. Just give me whatever the fuck you want, because that's what you're going to do anyway. Dana's crying about the rankings aren't good enough. Well, you have the guy at number 2 who is rightfully the number 2 guy, if not the number 1 guy. And you're not giving him the title shot anyway. So why are you crying and whining about the rankings and sucking off John Jones and his German shepherds 24/7? But let's carry on.
Why did you make an Ankalaev fight when he was number 2, when you knew Alex was going to be, you know, be in the mix here very shortly?
I don't remember exactly what the timing of that was, but we didn't make a fight. At the time we made the Khalil Rountree fight, Ankalaev already had a fight.
Right.
That pisses me off. And I'm so glad Kevin Iole just didn't accept that and move on. Dana's acting as if he's not the one who makes the fights. The UFC as an organization isn't the entity that makes the fights. Well, you know, Ankalaev already had a fight. It was out of our hands. That's essentially what he said. He already had a fight with Rakic. Yeah, it just got booked like a week prior. And you're the one that runs the organization, Baldy. So here's an idea. Put Khalil Rountree versus Alexander Rakic and do Pereira versus Ankalaev. Oh my God, that's crazy. That's problem solving. And they're on the same timeline, so you don't have to shift anything around. And Abu Dhabi's stacked, so it's not like you're losing anything from Abu Dhabi. It's crazy to me that he said that, and he says it again in a second. I'm just going to rewind this one more time. He's acting like he's not the entity making the fights. And I understand there's Mick Maynard and, you know, there's a bunch of matchmakers behind the scenes. But to act like, yeah, it's out of our hands. Ankalaev had a fight set in concrete.
At the time we made the Khalil Rountree fight, Ankalaev already had a fight.
Right. So, and that's what I'm asking you. So Ankalaev was fighting Alexander Rakic. You made that fight maybe 2.5 weeks before you made Rountree versus Alex. And I was surprised that you would put.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Makes no sense, Mr. I care about the rankings, and the rankings are bullshit, and blood and sweat and tears are making the rankings, and they're messing up John Jones pound for pound number 1. Thank God he pressed him on this. But Dana's answer is really unsatisfactory, in my opinion.
A number 8 guy in, not criticizing Khalil, because I feel like Daniel and Chael, that Khalil is a good fighter, and it'll make a fun fight.
And we do too.
But just
and look at the way Dana's smirking, and we do too. It'll be a fun fight. That's all Dana cares about nowadays. Merab wins the belt. He shits on the performance, doesn't say one positive thing about him. Bilal wins the belt in super impressive fashion. Dana White doesn't say one positive thing about him. You know, the list goes on and on. Dana craps on fights that aren't even boring, calling them boring. Case in point, Ankalaev versus Blachowicz was a great technical fight, back and forth fight. And Dana crapped on that as well. And I think he's holding that against Ankalaev. And now it's more about just the UFC becoming WWE. You know, oh, well, Rountree bangs, bro, even though Ankalaev is primarily a striker. People just hear the first and last name and oh, it must be a grappler, Dagestani grappler.
Is that the reason why you made the fight as opposed to Ankalaev? Just the fact that it might be a bombs away showdown?
I mean, eventually when we made the fight, that's why we made it. But I don't remember the timing of everything that happened. But Ankalaev had a fight. Listen, Ankalaev's ranked number 2. He goes out and puts on an unbelievable performance, and Alex is still the champion. Then he's next.
Well, you heard it from Dana White. He's next. Yeah, let's see if he holds on to that word. But again, if he goes out and puts on an unbelievable performance, oh, so now he has to get like a viral KO for you to give him a title shot. Is that the new parameters we're working in? It's just crazy to me. It's a massive cop-out, and it's a disgrace, I'm telling you. It's a complete and utter disgrace. Khalil Rountree should not be fighting for a belt. I know I beat this dead horse to death. A win over Anthony Smith in a competitive fight. This was a competitive fight before he got the finish. It almost went to this. No, did it go to decision? I think it's 56 seconds into the third round. But either way, competitive fight with Anthony Smith. Chris Daukaus. I mean, seriously, drop me into the UFC right now. I beat Chris Daukaus and Anthony Smith. Dustin Jacoby, who's a kickboxer, nowhere even near Pereira's level. Split decision. He lost that fight. He lost to Marcin Prachnio. He lost to Iwan Kutalaba. He lost to Johnny Walker. 2 guys who Ankalaev starched out cold. And you have him saying, yeah, well, if he goes out, he had a fight. We'll just listen to it one last time. It's just annoying to me.
Actually, when we made the fight, that's why we made it. But I don't remember the timing of everything that happened. But Ankalaev had a fight. Listen, Ankalaev's ranked number 2. He goes out and puts on an unbelievable performance, and Alex is still the champion. Then he's next.
There you go. He's next. Now, I want to leave you guys with this. I want to leave you with this hypothesis. I'm not ready to die on this hill yet, but I feel very strongly that I have a feeling that Pereira Ankalaev is not going to happen. One way or another, it's not going to happen. Ankalaev will beat Rockage, and they'll say, well, Rockage was coming off a loss to Yuri anyway, and it's time for Pereira to go up to heavyweight and fight Tom Aspinall, or it's time for Pereira to go to boxing. There'll be some other excuse why Pereira can't fight Ankalaev. I hope I'm wrong, and again, I'm not willing to die on that hill just yet, but I believe Dana White here is just running the organization like WWE. He's like, oh yeah, you have Pereira and Rountree, it's going to be a banger, even though Rountree is getting out kickboxed by Dustin Jacoby literally like a year ago. It's just a disgrace of a main event. I have no desire to really see it. It should be an easy win from Pereira. Of course, Rountree could fluke a win, but then we have an immediate rematch. The UFC is really starting to grind my gears lately, but at the end of the day, I do not believe Pereira is ducking Ankalaev. I don't think Ankalaev is ducking Pereira. What's truly going on is Dana White and the UFC are protecting him. They did not want him to lose to Ankalaev. It's no different than when they gave Sean O'Malley a layup in Marlon Vera for his first title defense. It's no different. Well, this really isn't the same case. I was going to say Leon Edwards got a layup in Colby Covington, but really they wanted Colby Covington to win that fight. They weren't protecting Leon from Bilal. So that's not a good example. But it's what they do. And that's what they're doing right now. They're playing WWE. Dana White's essentially Vince McMahon. I wouldn't be surprised if he's backstage shitting on people's heads at this point. And he's building his storyline here. Well, Ankalaev had a fight, and Rountree didn't, even though he's number 8 and has a shit winning streak. So, complete and utter disgusting decision-making from Dana White in the UFC. But hopefully we get Pereira Ankalaev in the next 6 months. I really want to see that fight. That's an absolute banger. And I think it's the fight to make. And I know fans, for some reason, are like, no, he's Dagestani. We don't want to see him. Where's the Dagestani privilege now? I'll leave you with that. Where's the Dagestani privilege now? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.